Okay, and we are set to go. Okay, so would someone like to pray for us before we get started here? One of you two here?
Yeah, I can open this up in prayer.
Thanks, Jason.
We're reading.
Mhm.
Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you that we're able to come gather together and talk about your son and the sacrifice he made on the cross, and just the events leading up to it as we study Mark 15 tonight. And I just pray that you just bless this group and we're able to hear good words and thoughts from Dustin's study tonight. In your name, amen.
Amen. All right. So, here comes the cat. What do you know? She's a cat of prayer.
Cat of prayer.
So
Now she has more participation than Allie.
yeah. All right. So, we're in Mark 15 tonight. Mark 15. If you didn't know, Mark 16 is the last chapter of Mark. So we are, very close to the end here. Yeah, we're in the end game now. So, in my Bible, there's a lot of study notes too, so I guess I shouldn't, but it would be less. It's like 4 pages left here, but it would be like 2, probably, if everything was condensed, or 1, or 3.
5 pages.
Really, in there. Okay, so Mark 15, and we're gonna read the first 21 verses of Mark 15. This is about basically describing Jesus' suffering up to the cross, but not including being at the site. So 21 verses. Allie hasn't actually spoken like voice yet, so I'll assume she probably doesn't, unless she wants to type out the verses. So she's reading and just post them. But otherwise, there's 21 verses, and there's 3 of us here, so that means each person gets 7. What? No, that's just not reading. So each of us gets 7 verses. So, I will finish. So, Hannah, if you want to start, and then Jason.
Yeah, I can read verse 7. Okay. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answers, so that Pilate was amazed. Now the priests had to release for them and the prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison, they had committed murder and incarceration. Sorry. There was a man called Barabbas. Sorry.
That's the first. Okay, and then the multitude, crying aloud, began to ask him to do just as he had always done for them. But Pilate answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" For he knew that the chief priests had handed him over because of envy. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd so that he should rather release Barabbas to them. Pilate answered and said to them again, "What then do you want me to do with him whom you call the king of the Jews?" So they cried out again, "Crucify him." Then Pilate said to them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, "Crucify him."
So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole battalion. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him, and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they had stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. All right, good. So, that's our verses for tonight. we're just gonna work through this. A lot of this is narrative, so there's won't be like a crazy amount of stuff for each verse maybe, but there's still be a few interesting things to talk about for each section. So starting here in the verse first, right? First it says, so remember from last time, what had just happened was, at least in the case of what Christ was doing, the last thing we read was about Peter denying Jesus 3 times. But Jesus was before the chief priest, before the council, and they had condemned him to death. And they had given up the guards to be taken to Pilate. So that's what we sort of read here. It says, as soon as it was morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. So this is, as it says, like the first thing, as soon as it was morning, they wasted no time to take Jesus and to hold this consultation to see what to do with him, what exactly is going to happen, or how they're going to configure all of this now that they sort of have something on him, which really isn't anything, but they claim so at least. And I just think interesting, just I don't know, again, bringing that point of like, as soon as it was morning, they took care of this and they were on top of it. I think that should just cause us to think, like, I mean, how quick, I mean, these men were to do evil, to do this wrong to Christ and carry this out. But yet, whenever we're called to do righteous things for Christ and to do good and serving him, that we're very slow to carry that out. And you would think, well, it shouldn't be like that. That's not, like, we should be quick to listen to what Christ has commanded us and serve him and carry that out. And not as quick into falling into evil. Of course, we battle with sin, so that's that'll be a struggle the whole of our lives. But yeah, it's just we want to ask Christ to help us in that battle daily. Okay, but continuing, it says, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. So, Hannah, can you read it, Psalm 118, verse 27?
Psalm, what was it again?
118, verse 27. Mm-hmm.
Lord is God, and he made his light to shine upon us. Line the vestals sacrificed with cords up on the horns of the altar.
Good, thank you. So this is a verse just talking about binding the sacrifice to be put onto the altar. And so that the language here talking about Jesus being like them bounding Jesus and lead him away and being delivered over. I mean, we do see in the crucifixion that Jesus becomes a sacrifice for our part. So this is sort of playing into that imagery that they're bounding him to turn him, ultimately to be the sacrifice. And not only that here, so it says, and they led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. So at this point, right, the Jews have had this council with him and have, approached him and sort of argued with him to try to put something on him, or to claim that he did this or that. And so at this point, they're handing him over to Pilate, who's a, works for Rome, who is a Roman. It's not a governor. It's
like
what's the word?
arbiter.
Yeah.
Kinda.
What?
Arbiter?
Arbiter. What's that arbiter?
He deals out capital punishment.
Okay.
Not the executioner, but he gives the
Kind of like a judge.
sentence. Yeah.
In a way, I feel like that's I feel like that's a good, I mean, he's sort of a middleman there that'll take these, that'll take these cases and say, okay, well I'll, this is what I should decide to do. Right now we do see that we're going to see here in a second, as we sort of read through already, that he's not the greatest guy. I mean, because he's being like, all right, well, how about you guys? I'll release one guy to you. You just tell me who you want, this and that. So he should be making just judgments and say, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, or this is what we should be doing. But He is the arbiter. He is that's supposed to be deciding on this case. So like, what's to happen to Christ? So interestingly enough, this picture of the Jews handing Christ over to Rome, essentially to be dealt with by Roman law, to be dealt with by Pilate, and then inevitably taken by Roman guards, is an interesting picture just in terms of, I think, what Christ stands for, in terms of being this covenant, but bringing the new covenant for the church, but just being representative of the relationship that God has with his people. And so in this moment when we see him bound, and being given over to Pilate, inevitably to Rome, it's sort of as the Jews are handing Jesus over, like handing these covenant promises and these good things over to the Gentiles, right? Like he came to them to preach this message to them, and he's saying, well, yeah, we don't want this anymore. You take care of it and get it away from us, because we just don't want it anymore. Which, in God's plan, we read about in Romans. You weren't there for a Roman study, unfortunately, which is okay, but as many people may be watching this weren't, but you can read it. Romans, basically Romans 9 through 11, kind of talking about this transfer of this promise, like that God initially, right, had his people Israel, but now that covenant has been passed on to all peoples, and now the ministry is to all the Gentiles, taking that out. So in a way, this is sort of symbolizing this coming to pass, that Christ bringing all people together, and that the focus on Gentiles is happening now. And it's all just interesting. I think there's a lot to think about there, sort of, and whether they're aware of it or not, which they weren't, like that this is what's taking place. So good. Any other thoughts on that? Just that first verse, or anything prior to that? As we sort of continue into what happens next. Okay, so verse 2, we get into this. It says, and Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Which is extremely similar to, well, actually, I guess no. I was thinking he said something similar to last time, but but he says here, like, oh, I guess this is. I think we talked about during the Last Supper episode that Judas and
Episode.
What?
You said episode.
I don't know. That's just the word I use.
In the last episode.
In the last well,
Online viewers.
online. Sorry, that was just the word I used. I'm sorry.
No, you're
That it's just a funny way to say it. Yeah.
fine.
But that was when in the book of Matthew, when Judas asked Jesus if he's the one that's going to betray him, Jesus answers him, like, you have said so. So Jesus doing kind of replying in the same way here in this case, and Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he says, "You have said so," which is here. I think Pilate is asking him just from the perspective of what most of the Jews probably think, where he's heard this, "Oh, are you the king of the Jewish people?" Meaning that he's going to be this king that's going to come up for the people, like as a in-person king that's going to reign over Israel and is going to bring them up to this greatness again. And Christ in his own way, sort of, I mean he is the king over the Jews. Like, that's not really isn't a wrong thing to say. He is the king that was promised to come out of David's line for the people, but it is not at all in the way that what the Jews would think. So, but no, I think in there is just interesting to consider. I mean, I think that's what's being conveyed here. We continue in verse 3. 3 through 5. I'll go ahead and read these verses again. And the chief priests accused him of many things, and Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. So, Give me one moment. Sure. So, right, the chief priests are all here, right? They're presenting before Pilate, right? And they're all presenting their cases again. Like they're trying to say, this is why what he did. This is why we should be doing this and that and that. And he's hearing all this, and Jesus isn't like making any answer as before. He's not really speaking, right? And so Pilate asked him, like he says, "Are you not going to say anything? Why don't you want to defend yourself, right?" So I know we talked about this last time, but again, we'll just mention it. Why, or ask a question? Why didn't Christ answer any of these like arguments made against him or give a defense or anything?
I mean, he's just kind of letting the prophecy like take its course. Right? He's just kind of a passenger at this point.
Yeah, I think also too, if he would try to say like, oh, but I didn't do this stuff, I didn't do these things, they would find every excuse ever to accuse him of something, but it really just shows within this how humble Jesus was, and like really like, it's just like I'm doing this for, to take on sin and to save, everybody else. And it just shows just how humble Jesus was within this moment.
Yeah. Yep. He wouldn't speak up to defend himself. I mean, he had every right to, but he didn't. I think we mentioned last time too that I mean they're all really, even in their hardness of hearts, like they still understand that all the things that they're accusing Christ of really have no bearing, really have no truth. They just want him out of here, right? And they're trying to get Christ riled up to say something, or to do something which they can use against him. But he's not going to play into their hand. So, right. So Jesus demonstrates, yeah, I'm like he's not going to answer, and he doesn't say anything. And Pilate's quite amazed by this, because I'm sure he's seen all the time where people that are brought before him are saying, trying to defend themselves, but Jesus is not saying anything, he's just really just amazed by who this man is, like why I'm this is so not usual, like what's going on. So, and that's going to lead into this next section here, but any thoughts or comments on those few verses from 2 through 5 or 1 through 5? Or move on to the next part. No.
Oh no, I'll save my question for the next part.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Good. So, verse 6 we have, it says, "Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked." So there's some interesting like discourse on this online. I did see some people saying like this is just some practice that Pilate had for whatever reason to be merciful, but it seems what I was reading was a lot based on what we know about Pilate and his other aspects of life don't really seem to correspond. But I did also read a lot of
what do we know about Pilate other than it's listed here?
We actually have there's like Josephus and another source that talk about Pilate being a real person that served in Rome. So there's also a great video I'll recommend by I think the channel's called the 10-minute Bible Hour, and he does a whole thing listing all of the history we know about Pilate. So that would be a great video too. I might even link it in the description below. You can go learn a bit about that. So I didn't want to. Yeah, get your pilot's license. Yeah. So I didn't do as much of a deep dive into pilots this time, but you can if you want.
The purpose this section is.
Yeah, well, you're right. This is also a historic study of Pilate because this is a historical source for us to study. So I always think that's interesting when people are like, "Oh, well, there's no historical sources outside the Bible of this person existing. It's like, is this not?
Is this not enough?
Is this not like? Don't you also consider these books like sources?
If you're not a Christian, you don't.
Right, I know, but still, like, I mean, you still have to admit, like, whether you choose to believe all the truth that they speak or not, it's sort of like, well, these are books that are claiming something about these people, and these are, claiming some sort of eyewitness testimony or history of these things. So we should take them into account that, oh, this person might have existed, or this person might have. I don't know if you know what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying everyone has to.
But if I wasn't a Christian, I would doubt some of the historic credibility about the Bible.
Understandable. I mean, yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying they have to believe everything that's
Especially
in there.
like Old Testament.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, and that's often the case, right? They say a lot of this was not true, or a lot of this didn't actually happen. But it's still an older source that we have had preserved, so you can at least kind of glean from it. Maybe there is what was the truth here, or what was behind this? Who are the people at this time? What were they doing? Like, why would they write something like this? Or etc. Like, was there a Pilate? There might, his name's mentioned here, that sort of thing. But yes, so what I was going to mention is that this practice, it might have actually been a Jewish custom before Rome came, that they had practiced as a way of showing mercy to prisoners, and then whenever Rome came in, and Pilate in this case comes, he sort of ends up taking on this practice, or sort of just to appease the people, I guess to keep the peace in a way. So that's what I read a couple of places. It's sort of hard to find information about this. You can't in terms of exactly where it would have started or what time, but just some interesting thoughts there. In either case, there was this practice they did where they would at the feast they would release a prisoner that they had asked for. So
They would have a feast before.
I find it interesting that they have a feast.
They had a feast before they crucified somebody.
No, this is
before they sentenced.
No, this is. I don't think this is a feast, but I still believe this is a feast related to the Passover. Like, this isn't a feast that they had specifically for the crucifixion.
Was Pilate Jewish?
No. But you still, I mean, he ruled, this was Jewish territory. Even though it had Roman occupation.
Oh, yeah, okay. I see, yes. It makes sense.
Yeah, so it was like during the time of the feast, he would do this.
During Passover.
During the Passover, yes.
Okay, so it just so happened to fall over on Passover.
Yeah, well, it may be that. Well, yeah, I don't know if we're supposed to take from that. It says at the feast he used to release for them, so like that.
I would assume that it isn't every time there's a prisoner, there's a feast.
Yeah, it was probably some sort of practice of like, in celebration.
Good tonight.
It's probably just as God had mercy on the people of Israel during during the Passover,
Yes.
during the Exodus, that they have a similar thought that around this time they'll release a prisoner among them to, so I think that's kind of the idea that's being conveyed here. Verse 7, and among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. So, Barabbas is a bit of an interesting character. He's mentioned in all four gospels. Here he's described as being an insurrectionist and being a murderer. And then Jason, can you read John 18 verse 40?
Then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention that just the John also mentions that he was a robber, right? So obviously there's a contradiction because he couldn't be all three at the same time.
I mean, the way that this, well, I mean, he could, but the way that this phrases it, it's like he's part of a group of rebels, and among them, they had like collectively like killed somebody in their rebellion.
Yeah.
Like they stormed the Capitol.
Right.
And someone died.
Yeah.
So.
It was it was kind of seen it may have been seen as some sort of like freedom fighter, for the people kind of rising up against Rome. I mean, he was and murdered someone in the process and probably took a lot of things they shouldn't have. But not a great guy. So maybe on the Jewish side, some people were like, man, he's great. Look at what he's doing for the people. But I mean, we shouldn't be murdering, and that gets
Jesus should be more like him.
No, that's probably Barabbas is probably closer to the idea of what they think Jesus should be, but that's
Well, he was Jesus.
What?
Yeah. Is it Jesus Barabbas?
Oh, actually, I didn't read that. Is that? Well, I mean, it doesn't mention that in the Gospels itself, but there's some thoughts that Barabbas' first name was Jesus. If you're curious as well, that's why he said that. So they may have had more. That was like a similarity between them, but don't know that 100% for sure. Maybe Jason can eliminate it from the big study Bible over here.
No, I just know this.
Oh, he just knows it. Okay.
No, I didn't know.
We've got a big brain Jason moment over here, guys.
Can't follow. There's so many footnotes. I don't know where this one leads.
Yeah. So that's sort of who Barabbas is. What we're talking about.
Depends on the manuscripts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's, first name may have been Jesus. We don't know. In any case, this is Barabbas. Barabbas is who's being taken as do we release this prisoner? So the crowd comes up and asks for Pilate to do as he usually did, which was what they described in verse 6. What was described in verse 6 here. And he says, right, do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? And why does he say this, right? He perceives that it was out of the envy of the chief priest that priest that had delivered him up. So what exactly, it says the envy of the chief priests, what exactly were the chief priests envious of?
I mean, his following. Right?
Yeah. I mean, Christ had this sort of following, from all the people who were sort of looking to him and thinking of him this way in often a much greater way than, elevated position to much of the priests themselves, right? So they weren't having it. They were jealous of him. They were they didn't like him being there, right? So what he's thinking is they're just probably envious of him for that reason. But the people, the people are the people speak up. Maybe they like this man, so they'll keep him. I don't necessarily see anything wrong. So we'll see if it helps out here. So, but then we'll go on to verse 11. Any comments or questions from verses 6 through 10? No. Okay. So continuing on here, but the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. Why were the people so influenced by the priests, to do that? What do you think?
Well, the priests were seen as like higher ups, like in a way, and also like as they were pretty much typically always right, I have to say, and they have a lot of influence.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to make someone seem like the bad guy when they're, kind of chained up on stage next to murderers.
Right. You also have the power of influence too. So if you have multiple people and like these higher up priests saying like, "Oh, well, we need to free Barabbas instead. Like, we just need to do that because Jesus had committed more crimes than Barabbas." Even though you have Pilate over here being like, "Crimes have you committed?" And it's like, I don't think this guy's committed any crimes. And then all these priests are like, "No, we need Barabbas, that guy." Like,
Mhm.
it's also the power of influence too.
Yeah.
But
Also, Barabbas was this sort of like freedom fighter figure, could sway public opinion. Kind of easily.
Yeah, there's a few factors at play here. Probably, yeah, one of the biggest being, I kind of like what you said, just like he's, I mean, sort of bound up at this point in this moment of weakness. Has already sustained some blows from guards earlier, and so isn't really is just, so in that position of him being in weakness and all the people sort of questioning what's going on, that the influence that priests have can take a much greater effect, especially when we're looking at Barabbas and you sort of have whatever perspective of him being an insurrectionist against the Romans, that you think. So it's at that point in the confusion they were all pretty easy to lead away. So yeah, and so verse 12, Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And then Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So they didn't really answer the question of what evil Christ had done, which I think is pretty, at that point, pretty telling of the position. I mean, they've sort of in this frenzy where they've sort of been told, "Oh, we crucify him or make this happen to him," right? But they're not really not really thinking for themselves of like why are we crucifying him?
Yeah.
Like, because he asks, I mean, he tries to ask what has he done?
He hasn't done anything deliberately.
Yeah,
bad.
what-
It's just the people don't like him because he kind of defiled it, or like he was like I'm here to like save the world and stuff and things. People are like, what? No, that doesn't make sense. Like, you're the King of Jews. You've been performing miracles and stuff.
Yeah. At least all the Pharisees and priests were very much like that.
Yes.
They are causing the people to sort of fall into this trap as well. But they don't have anything to say, right? That's why when he's like, "Wait, what bad thing has he done?" They just, well, all the more they're like, "Crucify him!" Like even more. They're like, "Okay, well, at that point, it seems like Pilate, he's he's one to satisfy the crowd, which a man like that probably isn't so quick just to be like, yeah, there might be some factor where he's like, "Oh, well, if they're all saying these things, like maybe he has done something bad," but also it just says, it doesn't say, "Oh, because he was convinced by them that he had done something bad." It says, wishing to satisfy the crowd. He's like, "Oh, I want to please you guys, so sure, we'll crucify him, and you can have Barabbas."
More than likely, if he didn't do that either, too, the people probably would have rebelled or something against him. Probably would have done it anyways.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Right. Yeah. He didn't want that to happen to him. So,
Yeah.
he doesn't say it here. Right? Maybe that's in Matthew's gospel, but he says like, "My hands are clean of this. Like you are the ones who declared this on him. I had no."
It's kind of ironic because that's kind of what the Jews did, or what the high priests did to Jesus originally.
Yeah.
They gave him up to Pilate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, here, you sentence him. You do this stuff. And now Pilate's like, I don't. He's yours. I don't know.
Yeah. You take
exactly.
it back.
They're trying to ship them so they don't look like a bad person.
I didn't do it. Yeah, because the last thing
no one wants to be Judas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody wants to say, "Well, I was the one that crucified Jesus," and I'm awfully proud of that. Like, nobody wants to say that.
Well, yeah. I mean, they want to, we don't want to be known, for killing him, right? We'll have it kind of just in the mess of things be taken care of that he gets crucified. This happens. We're doing the righteous thing, right? So that's that's what's going on. So, so one thing I'll say, it probably would have been in all these noises, it probably would have been helpful to have some supporters there, to say, to be like, no, like he's done right, he's good, like, don't let this happen to him. But we're all his close friends at this point.
Scattered like
Yeah.
the sheep without a shepherd.
Yep,
Or whatever that quote was. Hold on.
No, I think
I think that's what it was. Well, yeah, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered.
So they're all, they're not there. Like they are all scattered and they're afraid, like they're gone. Which maybe you can argue, okay, well maybe a few set of disciples versus a whole bunch of people that are convinced by the chief priest may have not done anything, but it may have helped. It might have been nice, but it's just unfortunate to just to see that. Just to think again, oh yeah, that's where they are. They're not there. So, and I think, at the end of this, I think an important thing to note, again, these people really weren't listening to reason. They were just, oh, this is what the priests were doing, so we want to, we want to be mad, and we're going to call this out and do this. But we shouldn't be doing things just because that's sort of the popular, or what sounds like what people are telling us to do, or like that sounds like the popular, Pilate was like, oh, this seems like what most people want, so I'm going to give it to them, right?
Yeah.
That's not why we do things. We do things because we have we have a right reason to do so, and we judge by the word of God to tell us.
Ironically, that's a lot with what happens these days and stuff, where you have people just to be mad, like people rioting just to be mad, like, or people agreeing or going along with just popular opinion, even though they don't really know what's going on or what they're talking about most of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great that all of us agree that that's bad.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, but we
go
want to
against the social norm together.
Yeah, we want to make sure we have. we want to make sure we have a justified reason of why we gather together on that point.
We're mad and we're not gonna take it anymore.
Yeah.
Why are you mad? We don't know. We're just mad.
Yeah, that's a. Why is everybody yelling? I'm yelling.
I just think it's kind of funny that idea, like, oh yeah, me and all my friends are non-conformists. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. We got a group here that doesn't
We
obey
don't
a certain social norm, right? We live outside of that, So, well,
we all live outside of it together.
we all live together. Yeah. So, yeah, that's up to verse 14. That's what and kind of 15 as well. What I have, are there any other thoughts or anything on those verses?
I think all of it just kind of shows like the irony of like everything that's going on, like just like how they released one prisoner to be gracious, kind of sort of deal, and then after that, Pilate's like, okay, what evil has this guy done? And they're like, crucify him.
Yeah, they're just
They're
just like, yell louder.
Yeah, like, there's like really no need for any of this, but they really just let their anger get the best of them, and it's just a lot of irony that's going on even from like the beginning and stuff and things.
Yeah. They're really
It really just shows like the downfall of humanity, and it's like, really, like people are gonna act like this, like, really,
they're they think they're doing something righteous for God, but which they're causing prophecy to be fulfilled, but they're on the the
Right.
bad side of, really on the bad side of it.
bad things.
that they're, you know, to their Messiah, which we see more of in these next few verses. Was there any other thoughts before I? Did you want to say anything, Jason?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that.
Okay. Jason has decided not to say whatever he was going to say, so we will move on. So, yeah, so verse 15. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And then from here, and the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole battalion. Which, first of all, I just think it's interesting that they're like, it says that he called together the whole battalion. So they're calling together all these guys here around Christ, and and they're doing all these things to him. It's like I definitely don't think this is necessary.
Yeah.
Well, they might have thought that they could have had a rebellion on their hands.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
And then more to control the crowds.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's true. That's fair. I mean, still, I mean, yeah, I guess at least from what the crowds present there looked like, they all seemed like they were opposed to him anyway. But yeah, maybe they were worried about some.
How many soldiers are in a battalion or?
So a battalion is a very large mass of soldiers. So I am under a brigade. So brigade is under a battalion, but a battalion is like a whole section full of soldiers. So it can be around like 600 to 1,000 soldiers.
It's a
It
lot.
can be quite a lot of soldiers.
It's a lot of soldiers.
Yes.
For...
So you have platoon level, company level,
Mhm.
brigade, and then battalion. So it like varies in size. So battalion is almost like the top size. Like yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of soldiers.
Thanks. I didn't know all the ordering. So
Yeah.
That's cool. But yeah, that's a lot of. That still seems like a lot of soldiers to me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. If the numbers there are at least close
Yeah,
enough.
so it probably would have been almost mass majority of whatever army they have there.
Yeah, I mean, in this it says they gathered together the whole garrison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I'm pretty sure is just all the soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or mass majority, but I would like to think in the circumstances it would probably be all of
I
them.
mean, what else were they doing?
Yeah, because in Rome you have to think. I don't think that not everybody was a soldier, and it was probably like they had probably a lot of soldiers, but not everybody. Because
Yeah.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think a lot of Jewish people were soldiers. I think it was just
Well, they also
mainly the
weren't
residents of Rome. Huh?
They also weren't Roman.
Yeah, well, that too. There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just want to mention that point. But in verse 17, they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together the crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put on his own clothes, on him, and they led him out to crucify him. So, my question here, just before just thinking a bit more about it, is just like, what do we think about, all of that, what's happening to him? I mean, it's.
Kind of sounds like playground bullying.
Yeah.
Just boys being boys.
No.
For me, it's just the fact of all the efforts and the steps that they really took to humiliate him and make a point. It's like, not only were they going to crucify him, but they led him to the governor's headquarters,
Mhm.
and then like they clothed him in purple, they put this crown of thorns on him. They had a whole battalion salute him and say, "Hail to the King of the Jews," and then afterwards they publicly have beaten him, and it's like, oh my gosh, like what is wrong with people? Like just the effort and the steps that they took out of their way, like they could have just simply crucified him, but they were like, no, we're gonna embarrass him, and we're gonna make a point about this, that you're never ever gonna do this again.
Yeah, really just like putting him on on display and just doing all these things for the
Yeah.
people. Yeah, they could have easily just been like, all right, let's take our guys and let's take them up and crucify him. But
Yeah.
no, they really upped the
I
effort.
want to think though too that they probably didn't do this with any other person, like any other like murderer or anybody else. I want to think they probably didn't do this with anybody else. Like,
Well, at
Jesus
least-
is probably the exception for the public
Oh,
humiliation.
they were probably like,
this.
this guy called himself the king of the Jews. Like,
Yeah.
what's his deal? Like,
Mhm.
Yeah, there's probably. I mean, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like it's like, oh, he's the king of the Jews, so we're
Yeah.
gonna dress him up
as a silly little
king.
title.
Yeah,
Like there's a point to where like, okay, we're going to crucify him and it's like, oh man, that's bad. But like when you publicly humiliate somebody like this and you beat them, that's torture, and then also knowing the fact that he's going to die too,
yeah, yep. They're just like, wait, this is your king of the Jews, like this man, like we're gonna, let's just do a bunch of stuff to him, and
And
whatever.
I couldn't even imagine just, what in the world was going on in Jesus's head at that time, psychologically, what he was enduring at that moment too. Because that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's and that's not even the worst suffering that he is gonna face at that point. But I mean, it's still like this is awful.
Yeah.
Just to see humanity just at its worst, just like mocking him to the max.
Yeah.
Really, they put a nice purple cloak on him, to adorn him. Oh, look at this great king. We got to give him his crown. It's twisted of thorns and like poking into his head. I mean, that's ow.
Yeah.
And I mean, just saluting him, kneeling down before him, like hail, hail, king of the Jews, and while he's this beaten, bloody mess at this point. I mean, it's awful. It's hard to imagine, like, that you're in that position and you're just like, look at what's already been done to him, and you're just like, let's just keep going, it's just a brutal picture.
I know it's a pretty old movie, but Passion of the Christ pretty much puts it in a good way to watch. I mean, like when I was a kid, my parents didn't want me watching Passion of the Christ because they're like, yeah, this is kind of a scary movie for kids. You're not gonna watch this. But when I eventually got old enough to watch it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is intense.
Was that the one Mel Gibson directed?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's a pretty intense movie,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to the scene of them mocking Jesus to the crucifixion and stuff.
Yeah, it's I feel like it did. I did watch that, and I remember I feel like it did a pretty good job. Just like, this is all he was going through. What it sort of looked like, again, barring because as being a group that's also full of people who are who I don't want to see. I'm not sure about images of Christ, so we may have some problems. We want to just be wary of that, but it was brutal. I mean, that's and we shouldn't be downplaying that at all. In any way, be like, oh yeah, he just had some bruises. This is all. They were just doing the worst thing to do. Striking his head with a reed, spitting on him. It should be, just both simultaneously being like, oh, you're so great, you're so wonderful, and so, but at the same time, they're like, you suck. No. So my commentary had like a few, he sort of split, as he was thinking about this, had like a few words that he had, was thinking about like describing this, what was happening. The first was bloody, which I mentioned this a little bit already, but this was, I mean, he was very bloody at this point. That was a lot of what was being poured out, was blood. But Hannah, can you read it? Hebrews 9:24. Jason, can you read Genesis 9:4? And then I'm going to read Leviticus 17:11.
What was it, 9:4?
Yeah, Hebrews 9:24.
Christ has entered not only into holy places made with hands, which are copies of true things, but into heavens itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf.
That's I may have the wrong.
You and Eli. At least.
Oh.
What's it say?
It's 9:22. My bad.
9:20.
9:22. Yeah. I must have because I had Genesis 9:4 and then I just put 4 too.
Indeed, under the law, everything is purified with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins.
Jason, you Genesis 9:4.
But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood.
Yep. And then so this is Leviticus 17:11. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. So yeah, I mean this is a very bloody thing that's taking place here, but all of this is for the atonement, like ultimately for our atonement. The life that we find is in the blood of Christ. The life is in the blood. This picture being painted there. And so it's a very unfortunate sight. But you know, Christ knew that this was a necessary thing to happen, so that our sins can be forgiven, and not just one time, but for I had a little piece of hair that was just like standing up.
Did go in Eli
Yeah, and
with his haircut.
yeah, probably. I did just get my I just need to probably shower again tomorrow, so doesn't look too bad right now. Because Brandon just got my hair before she left, so okay. Anyway, so in other words, just I mean again, just painful. It's a very painful experience. This is, I mean, shameful for him to be. I mean, in this position. I mean, you know, we think of Christ, right? I mean, he's the great and almighty God, but has ascended and humbled himself, and now he's at this point where he's being beaten by men and mocked, and that's like, I mean, that's we wouldn't expect someone of his position to be found there, right? But he's subjected himself to that. I mean, and this is happening for a whole bunch of people. They're, you know, being just a lot of shame being brought. You know, they're trying to bring shame on him with all of this that's happening. And it's shameful they're doing that to him, right? And then also the last word, which sort of ties in with well, something to think about a bit more with maybe next time, but I want to go ahead and mention it because they're delivering up to be crucified. Is Anna, can you read Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23? Yeah.
His body shall not remain all night in the tree, but you shall bury him the same day, for a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance.
So yeah, it's another translation or maybe a verse around that says something along the lines of curses any man who hangs on a tree. And so that's exactly what they wanted to happen. What they're taking him to do is to be crucified and hang him in this place and to leave him there to die. So this is the curse being like they're essentially cursing him. This is more of the Jews and the Romans. It's the Romans, but you know, they're not that familiar with the Jewish law, aside from the things that they, you know, probably need to know. But yeah, so another just interesting note is they're putting this purple cloak and that crown of thorns on him, you know, which and you know which are very superficial things of like what we think of as like what we think of a king, like that's what we see and that's what they're doing. But it's just important to remember that the kingship of Christ and ultimately what what is prized in the sight of God is not fancy fancy garments or the crowns or the sort of things that really makes a true king, but it is it is humility, it is everything that the righteousness of Christ that everything that he embodies, and that's what is made there. So it's just but yeah, I think that's all I have for that. Jesus being mocked, not good. Any thoughts on that? Any other thoughts on those verses before we do the last verse? No? Okay. So yeah, a few Bibles definitely like have this next section, this next verse group with the following section, but I just figured since it was my commentary group this with the other section, I figured since it was still not at the crucifixion place that it would be interesting to talk about here. But verse 21, and they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. So Simon of Cyrene is a character that is mentioned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but only in this instance, and not.
Is he mentioned in John?
No, he isn't mentioned in John, but he's not mentioned outside of that. Really, anything. He just gets mentioned here as this passerby. He says that they is compelled here, or it says they compelled here. In Luke, I think he uses a stronger word that they like sort of forced him there, but in other case, it's conveying that he didn't really have much of a choice whether he was going to help carry this cross or not. They were saying, "You're going to get over here. You're going to help him carry this." Maybe count. Come on. No, I'm good. Well, not that.
He's like, "Come on, curl up with
I
that."
don't see a cat on the down.
So it's just an interesting character to read about. This is kind of similar to in Mark, what was that, Mark 12, I think, where we Bartimaeus, when we talked about Jesus healing blind Bartimaeus in chapter 10. Sort of this, his name is only really mentioned there, and so you have to wonder, well, why is his name mentioned, or why bring him up at all? I mean, there must be some sort of importance to this, right? Also, when it comes to the father of Alexander and Rufus, that's just another thing where it's like, I don't even think that's mentioned in Matthew. It may be mentioned in Luke, but on one hand, you can say, oh, maybe this is a person that is familiar in the church, that we can refer to, that people know, like it's this guy. And Cyrene, by the way, is it was sort of a destination along the Mediterranean area that a lot of trading would take place at, and here and there.
Got you.
Had a decent Jewish community there.
So it's like Simon of his country.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was
gotcha,
Simon
gotcha.
of this, at least this region, just like how Jesus is like we refer to oftentimes as
Nazareth.
Nazareth.
Okay.
He's a Nazarene, like he's still Jewish, he's still in Israel, but it's like a certain
That's where he grew
portion.
up as a
That's where he
child.
grew
Yeah.
up, So if you're wondering what Cyrene was,
Got you.
yeah, what? But yeah, so we don't know too much more besides that.
Fun fact,
What?
I'm related to him.
Yeah,
Simon.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what. Yeah, you were telling me that. How?
Yeah. Direct descendant.
Yeah, he just
Through Rufus.
through Rufus.
Yeah.
Okay, not through Alexander. Okay. And you know that again.
Well, I told you, just kind of a feeling.
Got a good feeling. I got a hunch.
Yeah.
I got a hunch that tells me that.
Yeah.
So, we'll we'll believe you for now. We'll let him have this one. So anyway, so I think on one hand, or I already mentioned on one hand, you can say this is a person they know. I think another reason this is mentioned here again is, you know, I think it would. There's imagery here. I think that he was just passing by. He didn't expect to that day. You know, he didn't wake up that morning and think, I'm gonna be helping carry a cross for Jesus today. I'm gonna help him carry a cross for some guy today. Right? It was very unexpected, and he didn't really get to volunteer. You know, it was like, all right, who's gonna help him carry the cross? I'll do it. Right? It was sort of forced upon him, which I think to spiritualize this a little bit, we oftentimes are faced with certain crosses to bear in life that we don't necessarily volunteer for, that really come unexpectedly, and that we're just forced to carry or forced to help carry. And we don't want to. I don't think he wanted to help carry this cross, but in the end, right? I mean, we are called to be faithful in that case to carry. I mean, we have we're called to carry our cross, and we're called to help carry others as well, right? To in the body of Christ and the fellowship of Christ to that end. You know, till we see the Lord anew and in heaven. And so I think that's just a picture here of like, this is sometimes it's gonna happen, but we have to do it, that's what we're called to do in this Christian life, and what we're called to do, but even even if that seems like something small, that he like sort of helped him carry this a bit until it got to it, like that act of faith, like, I mean, that him doing that is recognized. I mean, he's written here, he's mentioned by name here, like that was him, or that it was important that it was him, like, and I think it's such a blessing, I mean, for you, for your name to be mentioned, like here, like in this by the Savior.
I mean, the authors probably got some of this information like from him, if I were to guess, right? Because they're not there, but they got there. I don't know. Their eyewitness Simon.
Yeah, so yeah, they very much could have talked with Simon of Cyrene.
He's mentioned by name, but I don't know. It's just sorry.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No, absolutely. No, that could very well be the case. And I mean, all the Gospels probably had a ton of sources, like of people they talked to pull all this together, right? From different disciples, and
like Mark's not in the Gospel. Well, he might be the naked man.
Yeah,
but
but we don't know that for sure, and he wasn't there for most other moments, as we're aware of. So, right, we shouldn't picture the Gospels as like the disciples just have this like immaculate memory of everything and just like decided to copy it down, but they were like, I remember I know some details, but I want to make sure we're getting this accurately, so I want to talk to these people and talk to this and that and them, and to write all this down for people to know to know about Christ and what he's done. And so that very well could be the case, but I think we should take from here that challenges are going to come, and we need to be willing and ready to take on that cross when it comes. But we will be rewarded for our faith, in that time when it comes, fighting the good fight, and Christ is there to carry us along the way, right? Because on our own strength, we couldn't do anything. It's Christ working through us, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He's giving us that power to carry on each and every day. So good. Well, that's all I have for today. That's all 21 of those verses. You guys have you two here have any, and Allie, if you have any other thoughts, do you have any other thoughts here about the text or anything you want to say, or any points that should mention before? Yeah. No? All right, cool. Well, yeah, again, that's all I have for the study. So we'll take some time and do some prayer request stuff real fast. But thank you for listening to
Don't forget
it.
to subscribe,
Yeah, like,
leave a comment,
subscribe, hit that notification bell.
tell us what you want us to cover next.
Yeah, tell us what book to.
If we get a comment telling us to go through a book,